Okay, ready to go. With me today is Dan Allen. Dan is a qualified carpenter and co-founder of TradeMutt, the 120 Grit podcast, and the This is a Conversation Starter Foundation. Dan, along with his business partner, Ed Ross, have a mission to make an invisible issue of mental health impossible to ignore. Welcome, Dan, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Christy. Great to be here.
Okay, so I really wanted to talk to you, Dan, as we both share a really strong desire to increase mental health awareness. But you and Ed have taken that desire to a whole nother level. So I'm really excited to have you join me today to discuss your journey from work sites to building a social enterprise. So, Dan, I just wanted to wind back the clock a little bit to your high school days. Did you always want to do a trade?
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was one of those who felt like everyone around me knew what they wanted to do and everyone had a clear path defined for them. And I just didn't really know. I thought about going to uni, got into uni in Sydney to do construction management, but I didn't think it was what I was really, wanting to do. So I thought, well, it'd be a good idea to get in the trade path. I can learn a skill. I can get out and get into the workforce. And yeah, who knew what would come of that?
Yeah. So how did you decide on carpentry?
I think I don't know. I was just drawn to carpentry somehow. I think of all the trades, I probably perceived it to be the trade where you could sort of have a well-rounded knowledge of the building construction industry. You have to have a good relationship with all the other trades and understand how everything else works. And as a carpenter, if you're building a new home, you're there from the start of the job till, when you're pouring the concrete till, when you're locking the job up at the end and handing it over to the client. So you get to see the whole thing all the way through. So I think that's what appealed to me the most.
Yeah, it's definitely skills for life, I think, when you're a carpenter, that's for sure.
Yes, it is.
Now, you went to a private independent Catholic boys' school in Sydney. So firstly, what are your thoughts on single-sex schools?
I don't know any different. So I am really grateful for the education that I was afforded. I'm the youngest son of a single mother. I've got two older brothers, and Mum worked really hard to put us through. And so I saw what she went through to be able to put us through, such a good education. So I never took it for granted. In terms of single sex, yeah, as I said, I don't know any different. I mean, we had sister schools that we got to mingle with. So I certainly loved sport, being such a boys, school. I was playing every sport, soccer, athletics, cricket. I just loved it. So yeah, it was good.
So did your school support your career aspirations, even at the time you didn't really know what you wanted to do? Did they give you different pathways to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think I felt pretty comfortable that a lot of options were put out on the table. We were definitely sort of made aware of all the sort of possible pathways from going to uni to getting a trade or joining the military. No one said anything much about becoming an entrepreneur. But yeah, I feel like we were given a lot of options and pathways, which was really great.
Now, you went on to do a carpentry apprenticeship. So most tradies in Australia leave high school around year 10, but you went on to year 12. Was that part of not knowing what you wanted to do? Or did you just want to get your high school certificate?
I don't think I didn't really feel like that was an option. I didn't feel like in grade 10, I had less of an idea of what I wanted to do than year 12. And no one in my family, my immediate family or my extended family had sort of dropped out of school in year 10. So I didn't even feel like, I think I would have felt like I was a failure of some sorts if I had have done that, even though what I know now, if I knew then what I knew now, obviously, my perception would be completely different. But at that young age, I felt like it wasn't, a done thing in my family. So, yeah.
So how challenging, when you come out of even year 12, you're still quite young. So how challenging was it to be at that age and to work with a bunch of blokes on a building site?
Truth be told, I sort of fit in really well. I've always been a I've always been a people person. I find it easy to connect and find common ground with new people really quickly, which I'm super grateful, to have that personality trait. And sort of combined with that is I've always been a hard worker, and I come from a hardworking family, and I'm not sort of there to slack off. So sort of combine that the people skills with a willingness to work. I was appreciated, I think, on site.
That's really good because I know, a lot of apprentices, they sort of cop a bit of flack when they're on the building site. There's a lot of banter that goes on, and some people, can sort of take it in their stride, and other people it affects them quite poorly. So it sounds like your experience was okay with that.
Yeah, and I'm super grateful for that as well, because I worksite banter and the blurred lines between banter and bullying is something that comes up for us a lot and something that we discuss a lot, and my understanding of that has changed a lot as well. So yeah, I'm a very water off a duck's back kind of guy. There's certainly a lot of banter that gets thrown around, but yeah, luckily for me, it was comfortable, and I was able to mold into that.
So speaking about how you sort of changed your perception on, the line between banter and sort of bullying, do you think that sort of has come about because of the change in focus by, the government and unions and businesses on improving working conditions, especially around construction and building and trades?
Um, I'm going to say no to that. I think the conversation, around bullying, banter, and all that sort of stuff is more, at the forefront now more than ever. But I think for me, the biggest part is a coming of age and a maturing as an adult, and understanding that actions have consequences, and what our perception might be, or what we perceive to be things like bullying and or banter it's very subjective, and it's different for other people, and you just don't know how your actions can affect other people. And so yeah, for me, I look back at some of the things that I did on the building site and some of the things that I thought was banter, and I look back now and I think that could have been bullying to someone else. So yeah, it's more of a maturing thing, I think.
Yeah, it definitely is open to interpretation, I suppose, on how
Mm.
people receive the things that you sort of put out.
Mm.
Now, I've spoken to quite a few people on my podcast, and many of them are professionals. And most guests overall have spoken about mental health issues on a whole in one way, shape, or form. But that being said, we know that blue collar workers are much less inclined to talk about their struggles. So, why do you think that is?
Um, Plain and simply, we haven't practiced it. We haven't, historically, as a blokey culture, we probably haven't felt like we've had permission to talk about that kind of stuff. But as a result of, being stuck in our ways, when you don't practice something, you get good at you get good at what you practice, and you don't get good at what you don't practice. And so talking about some of that tougher stuff, in a literal sense, even having a grasp of the human language and being able to articulate, with words, the way that we do feel, that's not something that we have practiced enough. And so we're now finding ourselves in a time where we're probably lacking the vocabulary and the emotional intelligence to be able to, overcome some of those hurdles. So, yeah.
So, do you think that can be drilled down a little bit further from just a gender issue down to more, job specific, where it's much more difficult for people to talk about certain things in different actual roles?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Our environment has everything to do with our capacity to be able to talk about some of the tougher stuff. So, workplace culture is a massive, massive factor. If you're in a workplace that's competitive and it's dog eat dog, well, that you're going to be far less likely to show vulnerability, and that's what it's all about. If you're in a workplace culture like we're trying to create in our own workplace here, where from the top as leaders, we're talking to our own staff about some of our own struggles and some of our problems that we've had. By doing that, we're giving our staff permission to feel comfortable, for them to be able to talk about some of the things that, might be going on in their lives as well. So yeah, environment is a huge factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I've worked in the construction industry for most of my career, and I've witnessed a real increase in awareness around mental health. But there's also been an increase in mental illness and many people taking their own lives. So, what do you think is the biggest barrier to normalizing mental health discussion and ultimately reducing the number of suicides?
To put it bluntly, we've got to cut the crap. We've got to cut the shit and stop pretending that, where our lives are perfect and that we don't, go through the things that we do go through. Obviously, you mentioned mental health and mental illness there. So, I think it's important to note that there is a difference between mental health and mental illness, and there are some people out there who are struggling with some really severe mental illnesses, bipolars, schizophrenia, sort of severe depression, things that do need to be medicated and that kind of stuff. Whereas I talk about mental health as being a spectrum. And you do have that negative end where you can be flat or depressed or anxious, but you've also got that positive end as well, which is happiness, fun, love, and joy. And we're not really framing the discussion like that enough, and that's something that we're really trying to do. The thing that really kills me is when you come across someone and they say something to the effect of, "Oh, mental health, oh yeah, no, I've never had that," And it's like, mate, what are you, a robot? Like, have you ever been sad? Have you been happy? Have you ever lost a loved one? Sickness, any of this kind of stuff, financial stress. If you felt that, then you've experienced mental health. So, cut the crap.
Absolutely. I don't think, there's probably anybody out there that can hand on heart say that they haven't experienced some sort of mental health issue at all in their lives. So I 100% agree that we really need to, cut through that and,
Mm,
and really tell the truth and be honest. So just sort of touching on that as well, I wanted to talk obviously more about TradeMutt, but
mm.
why you actually started TradeMutt. Could you give us a bit of an insight into that?
Yeah. So I suppose, the reality is I was a tradie. I mean, I still consider myself a tradie, but I haven't been on the tools for kind of 4.5 years now. But I tradie for 10 years. So between Sydney and Brisbane. So got a lot of time and experience on site, and I understand the culture very much. When I moved to Brisbane as an apprentice, I made some mates, who quickly became like brothers. One in particular, his name was Dan as well. And I became a bit of a mentor to Dan, and he always wanted to uh, become a tradie after meeting me. He wanted to become a carpenter because he sort of looked at what I did and he perceived that as, successful. So I was always trying to help him and sort of foster him and, through and try to get him a mature age apprenticeship. And in 2015, I was on a building site with Ed, and I was up the ladder and top of the ladder, and I got a call, and it was from Dan, and he was jumping for joy coming through the phone, saying, "Mate, you'll never believe it. I've just been signed up as a mature age apprenticeship, as a mature age apprentice, sorry, and I start Monday." And that was incredible. That's what we wanted. That's what he wanted for so long. Life couldn't have been better. That was Thursday. Sunday morning, I woke up to a call that he'd taken his life that the night before. So, 3 days after sort of being on top of the world, it all came crashing down. And that was my first experience with suicide. And I dearly hope that it's my last. But that was an eye opening. That was an eye opener for me. It was a turning point in my life where I suppose, discovered just how much of a lack of understanding there is around mental health in this country, particularly among young men, and particularly in the construction industry. And looking at the space, it's so stale. The tone of the conversation around mental health, it's all just so wrong. We're being far too serious and rigid and clinical about it. And is it any wonder that blokes don't want to talk about it when the tone of the conversation is like that? And we just sort of thought we need to chill this out a bit. We need to take a bit more of a relatable and a bit more of a fun and lighthearted approach to this conversation to allow people to resonate with it and to allow people to be able to open up. So, Ed and I had an idea for to make some funky work shirts. We used to talk about different ideas on site together that, as you do, talk a bit of nonsense to get you through the day. And we started to explore it. We started to explore the idea of making funky work shirts. And, we met a few people along the way. We were asking questions, how do you do this? How do you do that? And we were introduced, to a fellow by the name of Peter Ball, who introduced us to the idea of social enterprise and using profit for purpose. And it kind of all just started to come together. We thought, given what had happened, having lost Dan, it'd be great if we could use these shirts, create a social enterprise and create a shift and start a conversation about mental health. And that's the direction that it took. And it just all fell into place at, at the right time. And the rest is, almost history, as they say.
So it's certainly been an evolution because, you've got TradeMutt and then you've got your podcast, which is 120 Grit, which you describe as a podcast for the working class. And now you have your foundation. This is a conversation starter. So can you give us a little bit of a progress report on how you moved into the podcast and then how you moved into establishing a foundation? So how did it all come together?
So basically, we've bitten off a lot. I'm not going to lie. Like, we have bitten off a hell of a lot, given that, when we got into this, we're complete greenhorns in the mental health space. But my God, we've learned a lot. And I think the lesson in this is, if you've got an idea, put yourself out there. It's incredible what you can achieve, and it's incredible the relationships that you'll make and the things that you can discover and learn along the way. So, yeah, the podcast came about probably about March, April 2018. We thought the conversations that we're trying to promote around mental health, we never wanted to just be waving the mental health flag and saying, we need to talk about this. Come on, guys, we need to talk about this. We thought we need to be having these conversations in practice. And we need to be showing people that we're willing to have the tough conversations that we believe everyone else needs to be having too. So that was the driving force behind the podcast. And it's great, we love it. We look forward to recording podcasts, as I'm sure you do as well. It's really fulfilling to have a structured conversation and, talk about the deep stuff and be real. So, and you get good at it. You get good. The more you practice talking, the better you get. I'm sure you can vouch for that as well. With regards to the foundation, we had a scenario. Do you remember when Anthony Bourdain took his life?
Yes.
At the beginning of 2018, I believe it was. Might actually have been end of 2018. And basically, when that happened, a mate of ours was on another notable mental health charity's Facebook page. They'd put a post. This charity had put a post up about Bourdain. And someone had commented on that post and saying, this is exactly where I'm heading. So it's a cry for help, obviously. And our mate who saw this post reached out to this guy and said, hey, mate, are you all right? Like, has this charity reached out to you? Has anyone reached out to you? And he said, no, haven't heard a thing. And so our mate, being skeptical that they wouldn't have reached out, he reached out to this charity and said, hey guys, I've got a mate who's struggling and I don't know what to do. How can I help him? Didn't hear a thing. Wow. And we thought, this is the problem. This is the problem in so many spaces, the mental health space. There's a lot of people waving the flag and doing all this, but when push comes to shove and someone reaches out for help like that, no one's there. No one's there to help. And we just thought, righto, this needs to be fixed. So that was a massive driving factor to founding our not-for-profit. And the other sort of big part of it for us as well is, as I mentioned earlier, the tone of the conversation. The tone of the mental health conversation, the language, the clinical approach, it's very rigid. And so we thought, well, we can change that as well through our own foundation. We can offer a service and we can do it in a relatable way. So, that was the driving force behind the charity. And now what we've been able to harness is a real full circle approach, a closed circle approach rather. So with TradeMutt, obviously we're the fun social enterprise aspect of it. We make the funky work where, we like to keep it chilled out, lighthearted, and this is the eye-catching and fun approach to get people on board and get them talking about it. And then those same people, we can then funnel through to TIACS if they need, to talk to a mental health professional. It's free, relatable, reliable, and it's as we say, whether you're tradie, truckie, or blue collar worker, don't let it get any harder. Text or call. This is a conversation starter. So yeah, we're really stoked that we've been. We feel privileged that we've got the opportunity to be able to have a crack at something like this. But again, to get there, all we did was sell a couple of shirts. So
I think you did a bit more than just sell a couple of shirts, to be fair. I think you've worked really, really hard. And I think, you and Ed need to, give yourselves a real pat on the back for everything that you've done. But just talking about, the guests that you had on your podcast and then leading into your foundation, the conversations that you have on your podcast, they are really real. Like you say structured, but they're very much just a conversation of, it sounds like, you're sort of imposing and you fly on the wall for some mates having a chit chat. Is that your intent when you talk to people, to just have that really relaxed, chill sort of vibe?
100%. We've learned. I mean, some have been better than others. We learned early on that if we go in with sort of too many, if it's too planned and if we've got too many sort of rigid questions, the conversation can't naturally flow into that really comfortable and deeper space. And I think that's a really important thing to remember with any mental health conversation. It's not about diving in and talking about the hard stuff straight away. It's about building rapport with the person that you're talking to. It's about keeping it relatable, building that relationship, and letting the conversation naturally flow into that real space. So yeah, it's something that we've learned along the way, and it sort of fits with our personalities as well. We like to keep it pretty chilled out and pretty off the cuff. So yeah.
So how have you found, how do you find your guests for your podcast? How do you research them? Do they come to you? How do you find them?
A bit of both, bit of everything. Initially it was about people that we knew, contacts, people that we thought, would be good to talk to. And then we sort of figured out that there's a couple of components to the way we do our podcast. So some podcasts we have stories of people's lived experiences through mental health, which is really important to talk about. But then on the other hand, we've also had some sort of more recognizable people in, like some footballers, we've had a radio host, and these kinds of different guys who are recognizable and have the capacity to talk about mental health in a different light. So it's not all about people that have been through, some really tough stuff and come out the other side. There's a few different components to it. We've also had some mental health professionals. So to answer your question, we don't really have any set sort of criteria of how we find our guests. It's just, sometimes the right ones pop up and come to us. Other times we've got to sort of have a deeper think about, things we want to touch on, different topics that we feel that we want to talk about. So sometimes we'll come up with the topic first and go and try and find a person who fits that topic. Other times we'll just have the right person that presents themselves with an awesome story that needs to be told.
You've certainly had a real broad spectrum of guests on there, and, some really high profile people as well, both, within football stars and things like that, as well as business leaders. So do you think the take up from people is becoming, better, the more diverse the guests that you have on?
It's becoming better the more content we put out, the more episodes we publish. Some of them hit better than others, and there's kind of no rhyme or reason why. But it's slowly growing. We don't advertise the podcast much. It's all pretty organic. But yeah, we've got I suppose it's like most podcasts. It's kind of a niche subject matter. It's very specific subject matter. So our listeners are qualified because they because they've listened to an episode that really struck a chord with them. So we've got a good listener base, and we keep getting good feedback. So I suppose we've just got to keep doing what we're doing and what feels right, and just grow it organically like that. So.
Absolutely. The podcast is brilliant. So, for anybody out there that hasn't listened to it, I really strongly suggest that you do. I wanted to touch on your shirts that that you guys have designed, the conversation starters. How do you and Ed come up with the designs that you do? Because they're quite out there.
So we don't have a design bone in our bodies. We know what we like. We can point to things and we can look at things for inspiration. But in terms of actually designing, not us. I'm sorry to burst that bubble. But when we started this business, we teamed up with a graphic designer, who helped us, get some ideas on paper. And the idea was, righto, we like that. Can we go a little bit louder here? And then we came to our first design, which is the camo print, and we thought, this is awesome, because we've got the slogan, the catch line, TradeMutt, making the invisible issue impossible to ignore. And so coloured camo is the perfect oxymoron to highlight that, because it's the invisible issue. There's nothing camouflaged about our camo print, so you can't miss it. So yeah, that's where we started, and then we worked with a couple of graphic designers to get our Generation 2 print, and we managed to get through that really crucial sort of 18-month period off a couple of designs, and we've managed to get to a point where now we've got a team of designers and a production team. So we've scaled up to the point where we've got a team, behind us now who are working on some pretty wild stuff that will be coming out later this year and from then on. So yeah, it's really cool to see it evolve. But yeah, for those first couple of designs, it was very much just point and shoot and sort of say what we like the look of, and evolve from there.
So did you ever see, when you first just, were chatting with Ed about, wanting to do this and wanting to raise awareness, did you ever think that you would get to the point that you are even now?
I'm not sure what we were thinking, I have no idea what we were thinking to do some of the things that we've done, and to go some of the places that we've been and have some of the conversations that we've had off the back of, a work shirt designed to start conversations. It boggles my mind. I look back now and I just don't know how we did it. I'm not sure what I imagined us doing. It was just, at the time, that's what we were doing. We were making some shirts and we were going to sell them for this cause, right? And that's it. That was the focus. There was no, righto, let's become the next hard yakka, or the next whatever. We weren't thinking like that at the time. It was just, we're here and now, and this is what we're doing. Let's do this right. And we did that, and it opened up opportunities for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I think that's very, very important. It can be so easy to get caught up in the big picture, and I mean, it's awesome to have dreams and goals and aspirations, don't get me wrong, but in our business at that time, we had one job to do, and it was to sell, our first line of shirts, and getting that done opened up a whole lot of opportunities for us.
Yeah, because your shirts are now stocked in places like Trade Tools. There was a piece done by SBS on you guys. So you must feel like just pinching yourself sometimes as to how much you've actually done for your industry.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. And it's really important for us our brand is based on a pretty staunch set of values, and we hold those values really dear and close, and we don't ever want to lose that, because that's what makes our business tick, and that's what keeps us authentic and genuine and relatable. And so seeing things like, however many times we've been on TV now and seeing things like, SBS and having it closed, in a shop like Trade Tools, that's huge. It is massive stuff. And, you don't want to become jaded or ever forget that, that is a big achievement. So we talk about these kinds of things a lot. We celebrate these kinds of things with our team, and we like to keep the energy high because every little achievement like that is huge, and it's part of the fabric that makes this story awesome for us. So yeah, we never take that for granted.
Yeah, certainly have to celebrate all the wins, and you've done amazingly well to have so many wins. But how are you guys going to make sure that you don't turn into one of those organizations that don't respond to the person that needs help? How are you going to make sure that you still have the boots on the ground to do what you started off wanting to do?
There's no question about it for us. We take everything so personally in the fact that we are a face behind the business. You know, unlike most other organizations which kind of remain faceless, we've put ourselves out there with this. So it's our reputations that are on the line. And that's not something that Ed and I would ever want to compromise. And so, yeah, it's just something that we need to manage all the way through. We say we like to reply to everyone. We like to reply to everyone's comments and messages and all that sort of stuff. It is getting harder, but we certainly don't miss anything. We've got enough eyes on all our social media platforms, all the time between, a good group of us that, anything that comes through that's alarming is flagged straight away, and we take the time to respond. And now we've got a service that we can refer people onto. So to answer your question, how are we going to make sure we don't miss that call? We've just got to be onto it. We've just got to be onto it and remain true to who we are and why we started, and never forget that, because every single person who reaches out, every customer, they are the most important person in the world to us. So we need to always maintain that. Our team believes that. We believe that. And it's just something that we hold close. So, yeah, the day that we miss something, or the day that we change or diverge from that belief, will be a very, very sad day.
Well, I certainly see from everything that you guys do that you really do live your values, which is, absolutely amazing. And I really think that both you and Ed are making a real tangible change to so many people's lives, which is just superbly inspirational, to say the least. And I'm really glad that there's people like you guys that are there, that you're starting the conversations and you're normalizing something that, previously people just didn't want to talk about. But I just had one more question for you, Dan. What would you do differently if only you knew?
Not a thing, not a single thing. Our lives are so funny, and I mean everyone's lives. We go through such strange, weird, hard times. And often you compare yourselves to people around you, and why doesn't my life look like that, or why this, why that? But I always reflect, and I think of some of the things that I've been through, and some of the lows, and some of the depression that I've experienced in my own life, thinking that things are never going to change. But I look back at those times and I think I'm so grateful for that stuff, because that's helped me become the person that I am today. And if I didn't go through some of those experiences myself, I might not be sitting here right now doing what I'm doing. And I love that I'm sitting here doing what I'm doing. And I love the person that I've become. And I'm grateful for my family. As much as they make life hard for you sometimes, we all go through shit, right? But, it's those hard times that allow us to build resilience. And I promise that embracing that and getting through that, man, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And, these kinds of times, they make you the person that you're supposed to become. And I really hold that belief, very, very dear to me. So.
That's awesome. And I do think, resilience is a really key takeaway for anybody to sort of to build their resilience, to be able to, I know we spoke briefly before about, bullying and banter, but to be able to to take things on and not necessarily take things to heart, and to be able to talk about things if they do affect you. I think that's really important. So, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And if you'd like to know more about Dan, TradeMutt, the 120 Grip podcast, or the TIACS Foundation, I'll have links to everything on our website, ifonlyyougnewpodcast.com.au. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. You look after yourself.
You too. Thanks, Grant.